Life can be messy, but you don't have to figure it out alone.
Hey, it's the Luskos.
Join pastors and best-selling authors Levi and Jenny Lusko on Hey, It's the Luskos for honest conversations about faith, marriage, family, grief, ministry, and all the unexpected moments in between. You'll laugh, you'll be encouraged, and you'll be reminded that God is faithful through every season.
It will always come back to Jesus in the end.
That's right. Tune in to Hey, It's the Luskos with Levi and Jenny Lusko. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation, as usual, as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks podcast. I'm thrilled you can be with us. We have the author of a book called How to Play with Grandma. And I think it's just such a powerful children's book that's really, themed about love and play and how do we do that. And kids can help us, because I think as adults we get a little overwhelmed and we take things a little bit too seriously. And so Evan Bass Zeisel is the author. He is also an actor, a filmmaker, and a huge dementia advocate, which I will let him talk about as well. But prior to introducing you to him, I am just going to encourage people to swing by alzheimersspeaks.com. We have been curating free educational resources on various types of mediums. So things you can read, things you can listen to, things you can watch, tools you can download at our free educational resource tab. So please don't miss out on that and pass it along to friends and colleagues as well. Plus, we also have our sister company, Dementia Map, which is a global resource directory, which has, again, free information to access for services, products, and tools. So check out who's available and what types of things might interest your family. When I say it's free to access, that doesn't mean everything is free on the site if you choose to use their service or buy their book or whatever. I just want to be clear on that. And then I also like to give a shout out to my webmaster, Q for Good. They're just brilliant, easy to work with. I know that can be a real frustrating mode for so many of us who have websites trying to figure out the technology and the terms and the back ends, and they just do things very elegantly, very simply, speaking in our everyday terms, meeting their deadlines and being very economical. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's pull back the curtain and I'll introduce you to Evan. Well, Evan, I'm so excited to have you on the show with us today. You are doing some amazing work. I've known your dad forever, it seems like, in this space. And I can't wait to share with my audience what you're doing, because you are doing some really incredible and fun things that are really going to help shift dementia care and how people perceive it. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy work schedule to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Well, do you want to kind of give a little background to our audience on who Evan is?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give as pithy a background as I can. So as you mentioned, my father's in the field, and so I grew up around dementia facilities. He managed dementia facilities in Massachusetts and New York with a look on sort of sociological approach to non-pharmacological approaches to dementia care. And so I grew up a lot, hanging out at the office essentially, and interacting with individuals living with dementia, not in a, clinical setting, but more in a hey, you're sitting around, you're doing homework, and somebody's coming over and they're going to talk to you, and this happens, and sometimes this helps interactions, and sometimes, you can do this if this happens, or I figure it out on my own. And then I also have a background in acting and improv, and I got involved in the NIH NIA funded clinical trial, scripted improv, which studied interactive theater on the dementia population. And that was really interesting. I helped develop plays and test them and perform the plays and create training for non-performers to put on these plays where there were two performers and the entire audience are individuals with dementia. And then from the audience throughout the play, we cast characters that are in the play. And so the individuals with dementia played the characters in the play. And it was very much sort of an improv yes and based system where no matter what they did, worked perfectly and moved things forward. And then from there, I sort of realized that the thing that I could bring to the conversation is that I have this arts background, and tying art as a means for sort of continuing the conversation or having insights into it. And so I wrote and produced a short film called How You Are to Me, which is sort of a day in the life of a caregiver and her husband, with a bit of a psychological twist to it. And then recently, I have a 4-year-old very soon, and a 1-year-old, and I wrote a children's book called How to Play with a Grandma, trying to sort of have that conversation and shed light on the hope model, while also trying to make it not a stigma to talk about dementia with kids and in general. And that's already sort of where we are now.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so interested to have this conversation because you do have a unique background and you kind of grew up in all of this, and
yeah,
we're able to see it in a different light, especially with your dad's vision. He was just a pioneer, or still is a pioneer in the industry, and then taking your skill set and your interests with acting in film and all of that, and bringing it to different mediums is so important, because I think everyone learns differently. And so we need to use all those different mediums. And I think especially with films and children's books, they're a medium that people don't always expect the outcomes. They make them feel a little bit more. And I think a lot of times with the books, we think we're going to teach the kids, and the kids sometimes teach us.
You've got experience with the children's picture books as well. And the thing that was really interesting to me is it's not only a place where children can learn, it's also where the parent who is reading the book can learn. I mean, as I read my daughter all these books, I'm like, oh, this is a really good book. Like, this is some conflict resolution I should probably use in my life outside of being a child, which I am no longer,
Yeah, very true. And I've always said, and I don't know if you felt this way, but I've always felt what's good for dementia is good for all of the world at all stages. I mean, I haven't seen anything that we use as a tool or a concept or a philosophy that you can't apply somewhere else and do good and be kind.
Yeah, I think it's recently I've been thinking of dementia not as a disease, but an accessibility issue, almost in the way we think about it. And when we think about it that way, when somebody is deaf, we don't say like, oh no, they're gone, we lost them. It's like, oh, we have sign language. They can read lips. We have all the, resources. If somebody is blind, it's, we've got Braille. That depending on, the thing that is creating an accessibility issue, we adjust how we interact to, make it potentially better interactions. And I feel like part of that is often missing from the dementia conversation, where it's like, we just need to adjust. It's not, oh, it's done because something's changed. And as you said, I think equally with accessibility, oftentimes when we lean into things that are more accessible, it's a universal benefit rather than just a specific individual or population benefit.
Yeah, you define that really well. A lot of times, I'll hear people talk about, well, it's really more like a disability, but you defined it and explained it on a whole different level that I don't think people hear all the time. They just kind of put it in this category, but you're talking about the whys. And I think like with the kids, one of the things like I absolutely adore about them is they don't have those blinders. They look
Hmm.
at somebody and they don't care if they have a disability, if it's cognitive, if it's mobility, if it's speech, if it's eyesight. They just want someone to play with.
Yeah.
That's their
Oh,
goal. Let's interact, let's have fun. And I think that's a great lesson that they can teach us, that it's still possible. We just have to adjust, like you said. So
yeah. I mean, I think that love of play and curiosity. I
mhm.
mean, my daughter, we met somebody recently who's had a father who was blind, and it was like, oh, what is this? What is this? What is this? And it wasn't any judgment. It's, I'm curious. I want to learn something to, not necessarily improve, I think, in their mind, but that's what they're doing, is they're learning new information to expand their world, which I think is, something I wish we all did throughout all our lives.
Exactly, exactly. Now, in your own family or circle of friends, have you been personally touched by dementia?
I mean, I think all of us have been touched by dementia at some level. I mean, with, growing up, sort of the interactions with people at my dad's facilities, but equally so, ever since I put out the film and the book, I have friends who have called me up and said, okay, so, my mother, my father is dealing with dementia. I don't know what to do. Like, this situation is happening. What, can we talk about it? And so I would say my friends group and sort of their family members that are affected has expanded greatly the more I get involved, because I become sort of a resource for both, venting and asking advice as best as I can give. And so, uh, other than, my grandparents who, as they age, my grandmother, my mother's side, just turned 101.
Wow.
And my grandmother, my father's side, lived to 105. At a certain point, you start having memory issues, regardless of if it's dementia or not specifically. And then you end up with a lot of the same sort of symptoms or reactions. So in that case, both my grandparents or grandmothers at some level, and then a lot of friends and their parents.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we talk about what triggered you to write the book, How to Play with a Grandma? Was it to, help your children, or was it a bigger picture than
Yes and yes. I
that?
think as I was reading these picture books with my daughter, and she loves to read, and we definitely push that love. That there were certain books that stood out to me as I was reading them, and the effect that they had on both me and my daughter in sort of learning a lesson. The two biggest ones that I think of, like right off the top of my head, are like Rabbit Listens. I think is a great book and it's really about dealing with emotions when you're angry, and people deal with them in different ways. And it's a beautiful book that, with a lot of different animals. And then there's another one, Drawn Together, which is a grandson and his grandfather, and they don't speak the same language. And the entire interaction is done through the art that each one of them draws. And I realized there's this amazing beauty in children's books and what you can say with them in different mediums. Um, this can be a very odd reference, but the comic book writer Alan Moore, in the 1980s, I think maybe 1990s, wrote like this treatise on how to write. He wrote, I think it's called How to Write for Comics. But in it, he talks about how each medium that you are, expressing some information has their own unique traits, and playing to the strengths of them are what you should do as a creator. So in his sense, you have comic books and you have the frames of comics, and that can do different things. In film, you can have voiceovers. In just text, you can have internal monologue. And in reading these children's books, I realized like the beauty of what you can do in the mix of the illustrations and the text, and how you can also, because of the constraints of that it's being for children, you have to sort of simplify down your messages to be, as you sort of said at the beginning, a universal. And that was really cool. And then I also thought it'd be great to write something that my daughter could read. And maybe learn from, and other people could sort of read and learn from. And especially in the dementia sphere for children's books, I looked at a lot of titles, and a lot of the titles, I don't want to say they were the despair model, but a lot of them are like, let's sit down and we're going to talk about how grandpa is going to a facility and he'll be okay there. Don't be sad for him to go away. He's going to be happy. Or like, grandma can't remember things, but don't be scared. And that's not all the books, but that was quite a number of sort of the perspectives. And I wanted to create something that was play, which was joy, which was like, this person is still here, and look at all the amazing things we can do. We just have to adjust the way we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so sort of putting that out in the world made me, it was like something that would make me happy. So that was sort of a goal.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Okay. Well, and it's so interesting, and my listeners have heard this story probably before, but I'm going to drop it in here because to me it was so powerful. It was my mom started having dementia symptoms in her mid-50s, and she still wanted to be a grandma. She still wanted to babysit. She still wanted to be involved with her granddaughter. And I remember my husband and I kind of going, how are we going to handle this being alone? And it was early on, and we thought we can do this. They'll be safe. We won't have her cook. We'll bring something in, and we'll have activities. And I'll never forget the day I dropped my daughter off. She was probably 3. And and when I came to pick her up, they were sitting in the dining room and they were both coloring. And they were so intense and they were so proud. And my 3-year-old held her picture up to me in the door frame, and so did my mom. Both of them beaming equally, so proud of what they had accomplished, just melted my heart. And I think sometimes we get so judgmental of, well, they can't do that, or that's childish. And it's like, no, it's getting at their core essence of being connected, being happy, being proud, working together. It's like, how is society missing the big picture of that is what I ask myself so often. It's like, because, when you experience something like that, it's one of those things you can't forget. It's just with you, and you know the power behind it. And you also know if you take a moment to breathe, you also know what that feels like for yourself when you're just in the zone and life is good. And why would you not want that for our peeps,
Yeah. I mean, the amazing ability to be in the moment is something that we can learn so much from people with dementia. I think that is something that they get better and better at. And I think until we realize it, we are not as good at it. We're, observing or judgmental, or we have all these things. And it's like, but like, look at that joy, right? Like the joy of doing something that you care about and not caring what anybody else thinks.
Yeah. Or not thinking about what you have to do next. I remember when my mom was in her early stages, this was back when you had the pager and the phone and, all of that stuff. And I remember her looking at me one day and said, Lori, the world will still go round and round if you just take a couple moments for yourself. And yet there's this pressure. And I think, my mom's been gone since 2014, and this was in her early stages. So this was like 30 years ago. And I think how much faster and how much more pressure there is on us to be instant, reply to everything immediately, and forget what you're doing, just answer whatever comes in next. And I think, oh man, that's messed us up big time, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. And it's probably not needed. It's that thing of like, from your perspective, you feel like, oh, like if I don't reply, they'll think this and they'll think this and they'll be worried about this. And like, oh, I need to get this. And then if you don't and you miss it and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. They're like, oh, I didn't realize, people don't need it that fast. We just sort of are in this social media world, this world of email constantly, that we have these beliefs that we have to be, as you said, like pressured and do all these things when, really just being a moment, taking a breath is probably better for our mental health and ourselves in general.
Well, and it's kind of and people might look back at this, but when I look back at it, I think this was just a whole marketing scheme of, you have to be immediate or you're going to lose that client, or you might lose a friend, or someone's in need, there was just this urgency about everything. And if you're on top of it, you'll be better than everyone else. Well, now everyone's on top of it, and none of us are better.
No. And I think of it sort of like, it's almost like an addiction of some level. Like I was used to be on Facebook a lot. And then I was like, you know what? I don't need this. I'm going to like get off Facebook. And when I was gone from it, I was like, oh, like this is silly. Like, I don't know why I was missing it. But when I was on, it's the same with any social media, Instagram, whatever, like you're like, oh, I got to respond to this. I need to talk to, I don't even know this person, but they wrote a comment and I need to respond. And then you're like getting in this whole thing. But when you take a step away, you're like, oh, like this is so inconsequential to making me happy, or the things that like I want to do in life.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
It is hard because we really do get sucked into that. You had mentioned your experience kind of growing up and being at your dad's community and, around people. Have you had other experiences with, giving care for people with dementia in your own life that you want to, expand on at all?
Yeah. I think so. In building up to writing the short film, I wanted to make sure I understood things better. And so I volunteered at dementia facilities, either live-in facilities or day facilities, and just sort of did whatever was needed. And that was extremely eye-opening, just in sitting with people. And I think this is sort of a common thing. I think when people have family members who have dementia, just sort of sitting and being with somebody who has dementia. And what was also interesting to me, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but about eye-opening, is that each person's personality makes them a completely different person when they have dementia. And, this is sort of tied also in when we did performances for the scripted improv. We went to facilities all over the country and did these performances and interacted with, dozens and dozens of individuals each performance. And each person manifests how they are in different ways. They react to their situation in different ways. Their experience through life just, creates these different, I don't know, personalities, which are their personalities. And when I had the time to slow down and actually listen, it was amazing, the sort of the beautiful things that I learned from them. I remember, I'll never forget, there's one gentleman who I think he was at a live-in facility, and I spent, I don't know how many hours with him, and he always kept coming back to the same story about how he met his wife, and then would end up giving me advice about love. And it was the same advice every single time. And it would sort of loop. But every time he told the story about how he met his wife, he teared up a little bit, of not of like sadness, but of like the joy of thinking about that love that was like, it's moving to me to be able to experience that with him. And I think similarly, I've been around people who've gotten angry, and sort of the different reactions, but realizing that those are all real emotions and they're coming, the feelings that they have behind them, taking the time to sort of see them was really has been eye-opening on so many levels, depending on where it was. I mean,
but it's so precious when someone feels like they've learned a lesson so important that they want to share it so that you can learn that lesson and you can find that in your life. And to me, that's kind of, when people loop, I mean, there's so many people in dementia care and in families that, tell the same stories over and over again, but it's because it gives them peace. It gives them joy. There's a pride in all of that, and it's a connectiveness that I think sometimes in society we are missing. I mean, we don't even talk to people. We're just thumbing it, texting back and forth and trying to interpret words that are autocorrected half the time that we don't even know we're sending,
Yeah. Well,
and so I think it is really important to look at those, like who it was. It was Sam Simon's wife, and Sam's been living with dementia, and she calls herself a care navigator. And, in talking to her, asking, what's the most important thing you do? And she said, listen. I have to listen, instead of just preparing my answer or telling him it's over there and he doesn't know where there is, and being more specific. I have to listen to what he's telling me and why, and figuring that out if he's not able to totally communicate that. And like you said, adjusting to that.
Yeah.
And I think that's so, we all want to be heard.
Well, and I think that is sort of a systemic issue that we have in the dementia community, where a lot of people, are in facilities, or, people hear the same story and they get frustrated and they're just like, okay, mom's telling the story again. But they write it off and they don't listen. And then as the individual with dementia, living with dementia, they don't feel heard. They're just being ignored. And we as humans need interaction, right? I mean, there's so many studies that say, having friends and interactions helps with recovery from an injury and things like that, just the mental health. And we create these situations where we stop listening or we sort of write it off. And then from the other side, just, empathy wise, how must that feel? And so that when they are listened to, it's I do matter, which I feel like is a very important thing that we often miss.
Yeah, that purpose is so important. And yet I don't think there's a soul on this planet that hasn't felt left out and knows what that looks like, or devalued. And you do. I don't care if it's in a meeting or with your family, or with your partner. When you feel you're not heard, people either they get angry or they pull back.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
And then
Hmm.
people are like, well, I don't know why they're angry, or I don't know why
Yeah.
they pulled
Why are
back.
they?
They
Yeah.
don't want to participate anymore. Well, you're not really
Yeah.
giving them a reason to want to be there
Yeah.
when you won't even let them finish a sentence.
Or you're correcting them and telling them they're wrong and something else is right, or they're remembering something improperly, and it's like, oh, really? They're depressed for some reason, or they're going to be angry so that you don't talk to them. Like, I wonder why.
Yeah, yeah. And oh man, we do that way, way too much. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about your film, because I think that that's really important too for people to understand what that's about. And it's called How You Are to Me. Can you tell our audience, where did that concept come from, and why it was important to make? And then what does it teach us? Because it seems like everything you do has a teaching point, helping us kind of turn the wheel in a different direction.
Yeah, no, I would love to. So How You Are to Me came out of working on the scripted improv project and learning a lot of non-pharmacological, approaches to dementia care, and also realizing that my improv background sort of leaned into a lot of things that were overlapping with caregiving and, space to add to it. And um, I I wanted to figure out a way to create something beautiful that happened to also be an educational tool, but was not like, here is an educational film, just a quiet, beautiful film. And how exactly I got to that creative front of how this film came, I'm not 100% sure. It's sort of built over time, but it's sort of, the film's an ode to the caregiver, which I think is also a very underserved sort of group within the dementia community. I know, HFC does grants to help people have a break from caregiving, because caregivers for dementia have the highest percentage of depression among any caregivers, and that it is exhausting and it is almost never ending, the amount of work. And so at some level, I wanted to show that, but also show the beauty that exists within interactions with individuals with dementia. And so, little spoiler, but this film has a bit of one take, and it's a wife taking care of her husband, and it's a day in the life. But throughout sort of the interactions of the day, I built into it sort of all of the different techniques that I learned, interwoven into either the caregiver doing them and doing them successfully, or doing them and sometimes they're just not successful, because that's life, and sort of being flexible and showing that. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to counter this idea of ageism that I think unfortunately exists systemically in our world, especially America, where, you see somebody who's older and they have something going on and we write them off, right? I mean, we used to use the term demented back in the day for people who had who were older and had dementia or some other things, which is not like a positive term. And so
No.
to avoid that, the film is set with two younger individuals together, and as per the title of the film, "How You Are to Me," it's how they see each other, or how the individual with dementia, sees his wife. And then partway through the film, you get the flip, which is like, here's how they actually are. And by then, hopefully, we've built this beautiful love story throughout, and the love that the wife has for the husband, and the husband, for the wife, and all the nuances that go into it. And I didn't want to shy away from the difficulties and the hardships of it. And one thing that was really blessed about the film is that almost everybody who worked on the film, from actors to crew, had somebody in their life that was touched with dementia. The cinematographer, his father, had early onset dementia. The director, trying to remember, I believe her grandfather had dementia, and she had just sort of helped with that. Our script supervisor literally flew from LA to New York to work on this project and pretty much made no money because the amount of money she was paid balanced out. But she had somebody in her life that had dementia, and so she wanted to work on this film. And so that was kind of beautiful because it got put into the film. That, filmmaking takes a village. I believe that very strongly. And I think each voice adds, and each voice, because of how their lives were touched with somebody with dementia, added to the film. And, well, what if we did this? What if this is happening? Sometimes we sort of put ourselves in the mind of the individual with dementia. There's one moment in the film where there's just a lot of different voices going on at once, and it's overlapping, and it's kind of a cacophony. And that was built to show, what sometimes might be happening in the mind of somebody with dementia, where they're getting overwhelmed by too many things going on at once. And it's impossible for anybody to hold on to. And so, yeah. And I think the director did an amazing job, and she added a lot of things to it that then make it a very heartfelt ending. But I also think within the film, so many people who see it see a piece of the person that they've cared for with dementia in different parts of it. That even though there's, people react in different ways to having dementia, there are pieces that people can see within each. And I, for a while, pre-pandemic and before times, I'd travel to conferences and I'd show the film, and then I'd use that as a talking point to teach the different techniques that were within it, in sort of a like, okay, so here's this clip, like what's going on? And people would say like, oh, well, I do this, but I don't do it that way. That's really interesting. And it was also sort of seen as a point of discussion and starting off a stepping stone to, okay, so what's going on here, kind of thing.
Yeah, film is so powerful and can be used so many different ways. And I love that you really used it as a tool to have the conversation and to get the input. I think so often what I see in the industry is people present and then they walk away instead of really stepping in and allowing people to have their say. Because there's a lot of creative ideas out there, that we all need to be able to share, or feelings that we have that need to be validated, so that people aren't locking themselves in a closet screaming because they don't think it's appropriate, and it's just, there's such validation in that with the audience. And I think it gives legs to your project, because then more people are talking about it in different fashions, because you've kind of opened up that little treasure chest of creativity. And then they want to bring it to someone else and go, what do you think of this concept? Or this is what we did. And then it just keeps that conversation going. And that's what we need out there, in my opinion.
I'm waiting for you to say that my children's book has now motivated you to write a second one.
I've been thinking about it. I actually have a big book that I really need to get out of me, but I just haven't carved out the time to do that, with a lot of little short stories, because I'm a storyteller at heart. And I just think it's easier for people to remember a story than a step-by-step, this is how we need to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think of this interesting metaphor that I had, sort of an analogy when thinking about children's books and what they can do. I sort of fell on this idea of, stained glass windows in churches, right? They were designed because back in the day, most people couldn't read, and it was telling a story in simple visuals that this, whichever church had it, wanted to pass on. And that at some level, that's what children's picture books are. It's like simple things that are, sometimes more illustrations, sometimes a little bit more text, but they're intertwined to make it simple for anybody to understand. And I feel like that's something that, it's easy to do. And you said short stories, and I'm thinking, there's parables, there's Aesop's fables, like all of these small things. There's Greek myths. Like the reason that those last so long is because they are shorter. They're easier to remember. They're easier to sort of follow because they fit what needs to be said in a short amount of time so you can remember them.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Yeah, in a simple, non-threatening fashion, where it's not judgmental. The other thing I wanted to mention, you had talked about, the crew. And one of the things that I have found with the arts community is they are so giving in terms of stepping up when they've been touched. And it's like, no, I just want to be part of this project. And we don't always see that, because I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people are motivated by money. That's kind of the big thing. But I know, like, when I stepped into this space, I have run into a lot of people who wouldn't put themselves in that creative model, but they are, because, they're doing stuff a little bit different, and they're so giving, and they are so excited to meet somebody who kind of has the same values and wants to share and wants to lift and wants this honest exchange. And not that their model is right or wrong, but it's just getting the conversation going, because everybody needs something a little bit different, and not being afraid of the difference, being excited about that. And I think that's a beautiful zone to get into.
I was going to add to it that it's hard to find fault in getting a group of people together whose main goal is to like better the world around them. They're like, oh, I want to make this better. That's sort of been one of my passion motivations for the film, the book. A lot of the things I do is like, what am I going to leave in this world? And hopefully I leave it better than, when I arrived. And how can I help other people? And that having different people with different opinions on how to help other people, like, how amazing is that? Like, and I think that's both a powerful thing, and we could use a little bit more of people wanting to help others at times. And I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we've gotten so far into being multitasked, and the criteria is so strict, and everything has to be like A, B, and C. And it's like, oh, there's a lot of stuff in between those letters, just like with the colors, you can mix a lot of them and make all kinds of different colors. And we're missing, the cracks in the system, and we're like trying to cement over, and it's like, no, just do it this way, be a bed in a bag, and this is the answer. And it's like, no, it's not. Everybody decorates their room different, and what I want in a bed in a bag is going to be different from what you want in a bed in a bag, and that's perfectly okay. It can still hold a lot of the same concepts, but it needs to be tweaked to reach the people that we need to reach. I mean, we hear so much nowadays too about, the underserved populations, our Black families or African American. I never quite know what to say, what is politically correct. So please don't take offense by me on that. Or our Indigenous, or, there's so many different groups that are out there all dealing with the same thing in different fashions depending on their culture and their past history of how they've been treated. And we need to tweak it instead of just saying we need to reach them and trying to do it with the same tools we're using in other areas. We need to talk to them and say, how can we reach this community? What is the bedrock of trust, and not to manipulate that, but to really understand what are their needs and how can we truly authentically support them on this journey, and what will bring ease to them to and make them feel heard. Because I think, again, so often we're talking at instead of with. And and to me, that is not my model at all, as you well know. I think it's really important to engage people and to be an active listener and to tweak those things. And I don't know if you think along those same lines or not, Evan.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the word you said that always strikes me is engage, right? It's because each different population also as you said, I think earlier, understands things in different ways. And, our cultural history does affect how people interact. Somebody who is, Inuit or, from different areas of the United States, just geographically, like we experience things in different ways. The way, the number of different ways we say soda or pop or in what is it, inline, online, we just, even our just word choices are different, and that at some level we can share what we know, but then we also need to empower people from those communities to get the information and then put together something that is easier to understand for them and people who have a similar cultural background that, is, affected by how they ingest information. I did, a year ago, I think last year, 2024, I don't know which year it was. In sort of trying to think about the, underserved, populations, I did a Instagram video a week with like 90 seconds or less tutorial video, and just put it online as part of discussion of like, here's an approach, here's a way of doing something, but I'll keep it as simple as possible because I think, unfortunately, some of the underserved people are ones that are just addicted to their phones and always on their phones and won't, they don't want to read something. They don't want to, that's long. They don't want to watch a video that's really long. But if it's in a short segment, like, hey, we can reach those people. And I think, it's just starting those conversations. And then hopefully that motivates somebody to say like, oh, well, I can take this and I can do this with it, which I think is really cool, that like the sharing of knowledge and the expansion of it.
Yeah. Well, and then letting them know it's okay to tweak it to meet your needs.
Yeah.
Your situation is going to be different. This is an overall philosophy or concept. And, if you can get that message that's of why the change is needed on an emotional level, because I think so often we go at a logical level and that doesn't connect the heart. And to me, the heart is what makes the change. The heart says, okay, I'm invested. This is important. Where the other one is like, oh, it's a test. I can memorize that, and then I'll never have to worry about it again. It's not a concept to take in and kind of breathe in and out with and really evaluate and see the difference. But I think part of, the movement these days has to be about giving permission for people. And I hate to use the word fail.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to Ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
But everything we do,
We should fail. I've been thinking recently, like, I've got these 2 young kids, and you know how you learn to walk? You fail over and over and over again. And guess what? You learn to walk pretty quickly. And then how do you learn to speak? Well, you fail at it with work, over and over again. Like, I feel like, as you said, like, we should fail all the time, and it would be amazing, and we would do so much better.
It makes us better, and it makes us not when we can accept failure. And that's kind of a word I've kicked to the curb. I look at, instead of like perfection, I look at progress, and it's not about the right or the wrong. It's about moving forward. And when we judge people and make them feel inadequate because they didn't get it quite right, we don't have to give up on them. I mean, you ask any entrepreneur or millionaire, billionaire, they're going to say it's all the failures that's created their wealth and, what they've built today. It wasn't just this magic wand and their, godmother came down and go whoosh, and you will be blessed.
If it would be so easy.
Here you go. That's not the way this works.
Learning experiences too. Instead of, we don't even need to call them failures. They're just moments in which we didn't get our desired end goal, and we instead got a really good learning experience.
Yeah.
And I also think, though, with entrepreneurs, they're trying to find a gap in the system that they can then fill in. And you don't find a gap by succeeding. You find it by failing in different ways and going, oh, well, this is interesting. Like, there's nothing to support over here. Like, what if I did that? But it's a failure you're finding, not a success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that businesses have to, or should, in my opinion, never lose that thought process, because if you fill a gap today, it doesn't mean it's not going to be a gap tomorrow, because everything else is changing. And sometimes I see people standing still thinking they got it figured out, and it's like, no, things are kind of, they're needing different things, or maybe it's your target market that you're working with has changed, and that's okay. So how do you serve them without saying it has to be A, B, C, or D? And I see that even a lot. And I don't write grants and things like that, but with a lot of people that are involved in grants, they say, we know it's not working, but we have to do this for 3 more years because this is our grant. And they can't adjust. And I go, that has to be so painful. I mean, I can't even imagine being in there. And maybe that process has changed over the years. I don't know. But I see that with ideas for, they'll give money for a concept, but then they don't give money to market it. And it's like, well, that does you no good, because people need to know what if you think this idea is good, you have to think big picture on how's it going to be utilized, how are you going to get it out there. And that's so critical. And I still think that piece is missing in a lot of areas.
It's hard. Marketing is, I think, a very little discussed, unless you're you're a marketer, and but very undervalued area, because once you have a product, how do people find out about it? And I think it's also, you sort of touched on this also, the balance between like business mindset and sort of curiosity growth mindset. And I think sometimes you get too much in this business mindset, and it shuts you down because you're thinking of, like, as you said, sort of like a profit or a route to things. And I think of a time where I was having a discussion, I can't remember with whom, but it was about dementia. And they were like, oh, well, there's this thing called yes and like, here's how you do it. And I was like, that's that's from improv, right? Like that's the foundation of improvisation. And they were like, oh, is it? I just, people are having these workshops in the dementia world. And like, I went to one of those workshops on yes and dementia. I didn't realize it was from improv. And I was just like, it's so fascinating. The information gets sort of condensed down and sometimes lost. The amount, the number of classes I've taken just on, the concept, and the nuances of it in improv is giving me insight into being like, oh, well, actually you can do little things here that are really interesting if you understand it deeply, but you have to have that desire to. But if you can, if you can create a workshop where it just is doing that, sometimes people stop instead of keeping going because the gap might get filled.
Well, and I think too, that's like a perfect example of so often people pick stuff up and then they don't give credit where it came from. Like this has been around forever. And this is also entertainment. It can be used in your life in so many different levels, not just with a person with dementia. And, and to me, those are critical pieces. I always think we should be giving, people or companies or organizations or industry credit if this is where it started from. I mean, I don't see the harm in that, but we have this mentality, I think, in the US of ownership and proprietary, and this is, I'm God, and it's like, no, none of us are, and we should be sharing concepts because there's not one person or one organization, again, my opinion, that can meet everybody's needs. We need a multitude of people doing these things because your voice and your approach is going to be different than mine. And we're going to align with different people, or they're going to come to see both of us because they want a refresher course, but they want to hear it in a different angle. That's okay. That's all good stuff.
Yeah. Well, and people are just, genetically different, that two people could have the same injury, but they might need different recovery techniques to actually recover. And it's not, oh, well, this is the one universal way to recover from this knee injury. It's like, well, actually you've got 5 different things. You can, there's a physical therapy, but there's like 50 different exercises, and which one works for you is the one you should do. That like you need this, smorgasbord of options to choose from, because some just work better than others. I mean, I know with my daughter, we've got like, our bag of tricks of, okay, well, like if this is happening, we try this one first, but if that doesn't work, we're going to try this other thing because maybe this one will work when this one doesn't, but then it'll be the reverse on another day. And it's that wealth of resources that allow us to, get through the day sometimes, if she's having a meltdown or whatever. But it's like, that's also life. That, people with dementia, I think, as you said, some people are like, this is the only way of doing it. That might be for certain people, but it won't necessarily work for everybody. It won't work for this other person, but this other technique might.
Sometimes too, it'll be the care partner making that judgment of what's going to work and not really looking at what's going to work for the person they're caring for, And
well, it's that listening. It's that listening that you said.
Yep. Yeah. Well, gosh, I can't believe our hour has just blown by here. I want to make sure that we get information to our audience on how to reach you, and all this stuff will be in the show notes as well. But you can go to How You Are to Me if you're interested in that film, which is really a great dementia teaching resource. You can go to howtoplaywithagrandma.com. For the book website. We'll also give you information on scripted improv from NIH and NAI, the clinical trial, so you can look at some of those things. And then Evan is also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So
you can feel free to stalk me there. I don't mind.
Good. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate our audience too. And, one of the things I always ask for my audience is to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share. There are people in your sphere of influence that want to hear this conversation. Well, I don't care if it's at work or they're out for a walk or a run or they're driving in the car. People can access these shows in many different ways and get little tidbits. And, everything we talked about today might not be for someone, but that's okay. I'm sure there are plenty of nuggets within here that are going to help them kind of reframe and care a little better, not only for the person with dementia, but for themselves in terms of, how they treat themselves and how they treat others in their life, because everything is applicable. So again, thank you so much, Evan, for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I will just remind people one last time, check out Alzheimer's Speaks for our free educational resources and Dementia Map for our global resource directory. And if you're not in there and you want to be listed, reach out to me, or there's a button on the front page on how you can go ahead and sign up. Both sites are free. We're not going to track you. You don't have to make an account or anything. We keep it simple. We want you to feel safe and comfortable and have solid resources to use. So until next time, bye everyone.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebestier, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people could just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.